ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank President for inviting me, and I'd like to thank all the members, fellow speakers, and guests. My name is Atıl. I'm a director, filmmaker, writer, and I have also done a little bit of my humble pursuit in the academic aspirations, but tonight I'm not here as a historian, but as a filmmaker. And thus, I would like to present my case based on the dramatic theory. And for thus, I hope you don't find me a little insensitive, because history is not story. And obviously, pain and suffering and lives lost at the hand of Ottoman Empire was real, in fact. And I'm apologetic about the sins of the empire. For the 6th centuries it ruled. But here I would like to present a different angle, if I may. If Europe were a long-form television saga, the first scene, I would say, would not begin in 1453, the fall of Constantinople. It would not open in 1299, when Ottomans first set up shop, nor it would open in the, it would definitely open in the year, I would say, 1054, the Great Schism inside the divided house. On one side, the Latin Christian West, on the other, the Greek Orthodox East. And this really sets the stage for the time-honored saga, time-honored story that we know, the rival brothers. Two brothers who once shared their fate, ritual, destiny, now turn their backs on each other. Suspicion thickens, the alliances crack, and the story, their story, loses balance and relevance. The two rival brothers competing for the fatherly blessing, ecumenic supremacy, and then almost in the same historical breath, a third figure enters the stage. And it's a coincidence they enter the stage on the same year, 1054, the Great Schism. On the far edges of the empire, near Trabzoni, Turkish horsemen appear in the hills, not as villains, not as saviors, but as the archetypical outsider, a Sigma anti-villain. The unexpected character who walks into the broken family and forces every other character to grow up. From the schism in 1054 to the field of Manzikert in 1071, that outsider does exactly what the great drama requires. It disrupts the entire cast, destabilizes the stagnant order, and activates the plot. Manzikert, as some of you know, is the year that the Turkic tribes started to actually invade Anatolia. It was the beginning of their long quest. It is the inciting incident that the entire European narrative started. A wounded Byzantium turns westward. Rome regains a sense of mission. The Crusades ignite. Feudal knights who once raided each other's villages for sport suddenly discover a cause larger than their own fields. In a filmmaker's language, the Turks are the catalytic presence that forces the protagonist to reveal itself. There is no Frodo without Sauron, no Sherlock without Moriarty, no Rome without Carthage, and no unified Europe without the pressure of the Turkish advance. This is not Ottoman nostalgia. Here I am regretting the demise of the Ottoman Empire, not out of need for boasting about the pompous past victorious battles won. No, this is about story logic. I truly regret the demise of Ottoman Empire because Europe becomes the Europe we recognize only after the outsider enters the room. Consider what follows the Turkish arrival. Europe invents standing armies, reforms taxation, builds modern navies, professionalizes diplomacy, intelligence. It unites kingdoms that once considered unity a fantasy. It redraws its commercial routes across the seas rather than the old Roman roads. It creates the legal and administrative architecture that will one day power the modern nation states. The outsider is, however, never absorbed, never invited in, never welcomed into the central table. Yet, its presence shapes everything the central table becomes. The Enlightenment thinkers saw this clearly as well. When they wrote about the Turks, they were not talking about an exotic, faraway world. They were describing the force that defined Europe, its own political shape. Machiavelli treats the Ottoman state as purely narrative clarity, a model of centralized discipline in a world of quarreling barons. To him, the Turks were not mysterious. They were structurally brilliant, a reminder to Europe of what a functioning state could look like. Montesquieu uses the Turk as a mirror. He holds them not as stereotypes, but as a tool to reveal Europe's contradictions about law, liberty, and culture. Whatever he says, the Turk, he's really asking, what does this reveal about us? Voltaire sees something even more interesting. He sees pluralism. He sees state where Jews, Armenians, Greeks, Catholics, Assyrians, and Muslims lived without inquisitions and without purges. He used the Ottoman world to show that tolerance was possible long before Europe practiced it on its own soil. Marx even goes further. To him, European empire is the keystone of entire European balance of power. Its strength or weaknesses determined the rhythm of the continent. So when we debate whether this house regrets the demise of Ottoman Empire, I would say the real question is not moral, but it's structural. What happens to a story when the outsider leaves stage? For 6 centuries, the Ottomans played the role that gave Europe its dramatic tension, a force that could not be fully conquered nor fully understood. The tension produced alliances, reforms, institutions, and identities. But Europe later claimed them as self-generated. But make no mistake, no protagonist becomes a protagonist alone. Pressure shapes destiny. Once that pressure collapsed, once the outsider weakened, the European story fractured again. The Balkans exploded in crisis, yes, it's a fact. And great powers meddled, ethnic nationalism spiraled into violence, the delicate balance that has been held together by a single imperial structure vanished. Within 2 decades of the Ottoman collapse, Europe plunged into a world. This is the irony. The empire that Europe long feared was often the empire that kept Europe from destroying itself. Regret is a complicated word, but the motion before us is not asking us to admire everything the empire did. It's asking whether the world became more stable, more peaceful, or more coherent after its disappearance. Thank you.